guys, so we're back with another mat chat with Coach Corey, and this time we're talking about kickboxing and sort of the history and what's up with, we've got one class called kickboxing, one class called Muay Thai, but they have a lot of similarities, what's going on there. And so there's a lot of rich history to kickboxing, and Coach Corey's gonna go ahead and take it away.
So guys, kickboxing as itself is actually like a very vague term. Around the world, kickboxing, if you said that, it could have meant a variety of different things. Obviously, in the original kickboxing, which is Muay Thai, okay, developed in Thailand, very, very old art, very ancient. Before it was Muay Thai, there was little regional styles, Muay Lao, Muay Boran, Muay Khmer, like all these little Muay styles. Eventually, I think it was toward the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, the royal Thai government's like, hey, let's turn this into a sanctioned sport, and then it kind of became Muay Thai, which was kind of cool because it took away some of the stuff like forearms and whatnot, and some of the weapon stuff, and made it more of like a direct combat hand-to-hand art, which is really cool. So in Thailand, that's where it developed. It was some really old art. Okay, where people would fight off punches, kicks, knees, elbows. Even back in the day, they allowed headbutts back in the day.
There's still a version of
there's still a version of that, which is called Lethwei, which is in the neighboring Myanmar, or known as Burma. That still exists. Not as big as Muay Thai. It's still a little bit more rough, unrefined. But Muay Thai fighters are considered like the king of the rings because of their excellence in boxing, kicking, and then, of course, the clinch, knees, and elbows. Now, over in Japan and Holland, actually Japan and Holland had a very similar story of how they got into kickboxing, which was the style of Kyokushin. You'll hear me sometimes talk about it in some of my classes, Kyokushin karate. They would send Kyokushin reps to Thailand because they heard about these insanely tough Thai fighters that no one could beat. They went over there, sent their best karate guys. It was always pretty even. I always think, I think I heard most of the times the Muay Thai guys maybe won one over the Kyokushin guys if it wasn't a draw. Like one guy would beat one Kyokushin guy, and one Muay Thai fighter would get defeated, and so on and so forth. But both cultures were so impressed by the art of Muay Thai that they sent their best black belts there to learn it, bring it back, and then as they combined the karate and the Muay Thai, they took out, I believe, the elbows. I think they took out most of the sweeps, but they kept the clinch and knees, and that became known as kickboxing. Now, that's different from kickboxing here in the States. Kickboxing here in the States developed from point karate. So like Chuck Norris was a point karate fighter. You ever hear of a guy named Joe Louis? He was actually the first American kickboxing champion. Benny Urquidez, Don Wilson, Bill Wallace, Superfoot Wallace. A lot of these guys were point karate guys that essentially got sick of the semi-contact rule, wanted to fight for real and see who was the toughest guy in the room. And full contact karate developed, and they later changed that into full contact kickboxing. Now, for a long time here in the States, that was like kind of the predominant style. I grew up watching it. I loved it.
Real quick, is full contact karate to full contact kickboxing, was it just a name change, or was there actually
just a name change? Just a name change. Yeah, it was just the karate guys were like, hey, we're taking off the gi-tops. We're going to put on satiny kickboxing pants. We're going to put on gloves, boxing gloves. And we're gonna fight. Now, it was kind of interesting. You couldn't kick beneath the waist. Okay, so you were,
which is like
very weird. I'm a Muay Thai guy. Now, I started off as an American kickboxer, so when I was learning Muay Thai, I'm like, this is weird kicking to the leg. But thinking back to it, it's kind of weird. You weren't allowed to kick to the leg. You could foot sweep, but it was only above the waist. You could kick. You had to use your foot, couldn't use your shin, and you had to wear kick pads on your feet, which were like these foam pads for your feet. It was really weird, and you had to throw 8 power kicks per round.
And I do remember that.
Yeah, I grew up on watching that. Dennis Alexio and Don the Dragon Wilson, all those guys. Now, it was really cool, and the Americans thought they were the bad until they tried going over to Thailand. Benny Urquidez, who he falsely claimed he was like undefeated in kickboxing. He wasn't. He lost to, I think it was 2 Thais in Thailand under full Thai rules. He had never fought under full Thai rules.
We do have a Yukita-Kan, which is Benny the Jet's system. instructor that's
love
associated.
Benny,
So
love Benny. He's awesome, but he did lose to 2 ties. It's just a fact. Hey,
possibly, but possibly not.
The greatest all lose. Don the Dragon Wilson, who's another great American kickboxer, one of the best. He beat some of the biggest names in sport. Jean-Yves Theriault, Dennis Alexio. He beat Branko Sikatic. He lost to Thais in Thailand, who he was heavier than and bigger than. Again, it was like these kickboxers from around the world had never experienced full Thai rules, which meant you could punch, you could kick to the leg. I could grab you and knee you, and God forbid if I hit you with an elbow, that was also allowed. It's just these guys weren't used to it. This was a foreign system. If you ever watch the movie, I grew up on this one. If you ever grew up on the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Kickboxer, right? Dennis Alexio is a real kickboxing champion, and he plays his brother in it. He's American kickboxing champion. He's undefeated, goes to Thailand and gets beat. It was just a fact. These guys had never experienced...
By Tong Po. Guy kicks the freaking...
the
pillars.
The plaster comes down. They just had never experienced getting kicked in the leg, getting kneed in the body, taking an elbow to the head. I mean, if you spent your whole career just getting hit by boxing gloves and foot pads, that's going to be drastically different. So it kind of woke a lot of these guys up. I know a lot of them started cross-training in Muay Thai. It just became a thing. I know probably the biggest example of this was in the 80s. He was actually really big up in the Midwest. If you ever heard of Rick the Jet Rufus.
Brother of Duke
Rufus. Yeah. He was. Their family was very famous in Wisconsin and Milwaukee and surrounding areas for kickboxing, and Rick was multiple-time world champion. He took a challenge against a Thai that he outweighed. I'm going to butcher his name. I think it was Chikpong Sikrungut. I'm going to butcher that. Sorry,
hopefully
guys.
No one's calling us out on that.
Don't speak the greatest Thai. But Cheng Puk, he fought Rick Rufus under modified rules where he wasn't allowed to hit with an elbow, wasn't allowed to hit with a knee, but was allowed to hit with low kicks. And he ended up beating Rick Rufus, who, this was like unheard of. Like, this shocked people. People were like, how did this little Thai fighter beat this super big, strong American that's throwing all these spinning kicks when he's just kicking him in the leg? But it was a wake-up call to like, hey, what's actually working? Do you need all these fancy things, or can you just kick someone in the leg? Luckily, after that, you started seeing more rule sets open up in kickboxing, especially here in the United States. You started hearing of low kick rules, which was kind of modified after that fight, which was, hey, I can kick the leg. Okay, and then you started hearing K1 rules. That means I can grab and knee and then let go. Well, now there's full Thai rules. Well, now I can knee as long as I want, grab you as long as I want, elbow. Then there was Sanshao, which is like I can clinch you and throw you from kickboxing. So it kept growing, and it still grows. A lot of my students here, I tell them always to watch ONE FC, One Fighting Championship. A big thing they do now is cage Muay Thai, which is essentially Muay Thai rules, but in MMA gloves, which if you like knockouts, that's really fun to watch. And then there's another one on UFC Fight Pass called Karate Combat, which it's the world's...
Is that they're in like
a bowl?
Than a cage, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's some sort of modified kickboxing rule set.
You can't use the cage or the
you
ring,
fall. Yeah, you fall. So it's not traditional kickboxing, but it's awesome. Yeah, it's really well done. They have awesome karate black belts, awesome taekwondo people in there. But yeah, it just shows like even today, like kickboxing can vary from organization to organization. It's so cool. And then I guess, what does that mean for our school, right? Kickboxing and Muay Thai. Okay, so there's a clear difference in the class. So in my kickboxing class, guys, you're gonna do some partner work, right? We always end up doing some sort of pad work. I always like to make sure students are getting the pad work feel. I think it's really, really important for them. But it's gonna be a lot of like bag work, conditioning. It's kind of like the whole package. Now, in my Muay Thai class, it's much more combat ready skills. Not saying you won't get a big workout. Last 2 weeks especially, my people were huffing, puffing, sweating, dying. They loved it. But it's much more partner work. You're actually exclusively working with partner. We never go on a bag. We're always hitting pads. We're doing drills. We're doing sparring. It's just a little bit more combat ready. I guess a little bit more self-defense oriented, as opposed to my kickboxing class, which is maybe a little bit more conditioning oriented. Both are important. I think both go together. I mean, if you're training Muay Thai, do the kickboxing class for your cardio and your conditioning. If you're doing fitness kickboxing for your health, and you're like, hey, I want to learn a little bit more self-defense aspect, come to my Muay Thai class. You won't be lost. You won't be lost. That's the cool thing. If you go either or, there's going to be a meeting point in the middle where you're going to kind of feel comfortable.
I like you mention that because I do get a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm kind of intimidated about that class. But if it looks fun, I mean, you'll fit in just fine. People are really well.
I want to say, y'all, no matter what, you can train. It doesn't matter if you're man, woman, if you're older, younger, if you've been doing athletics for a long time, or if you're brand new to it. These arts can be trained by anyone. You just got to find the courage to come try a class.
Yeah. And kind of to your point about like not thinking that just because Muay Thai is kind of considered the fight ready class, it's not a workout. And on the flip side,
it's a workout,
yeah. And just because we call the other class fitness kickboxing doesn't mean that you're not actually learning how to fight.
Yeah, no, you are. You learn how to hit the bag. I'm teaching you boxing combinations. I'm teaching you kicks. Eventually, again, we do go to pad work. We usually finish up the class with pad work. So if we've covered something on the bag, we'll usually cover it on some sort of pad work. Just again, because I want you to learn the technique and actually know it. But I want you to also know that you can use it as a way to like up your cardio and build strong hips and hip muscles and things like that.
Yeah. And I notice a very big difference in a person's level of power if they hit a bag versus if they don't. So I think those classes are a very important part of becoming the next level of a fighter.
Find time for each. That's what I always say. Find time for each. Again, I might cover one thing in Muay Thai. Like this week, we're covering boxing and the elbows, and in my kickboxing class, you're probably going to be working more standard boxing and kicking skills, which is great because then if whatever you're missing out in Muay Thai, you're just going to gain in the kickboxing class.
You can always pull what some of our awesome members do, which is come to Muay Thai and then stay for the kickboxing and burn it out, and you get to work all the reps on the bag as well.
Yeah, I mean that's a very popular thing here. I'll have multiple people, especially on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. They'll come for the Muay Thai class at 6 and stay for the fitness kickboxing class at 6:45, and then those real Iron Warriors will stay for the jiu-jitsu class afterwards. So yeah, no, it's a popular thing, and there's nothing better feeling, I know to me, than at the end of the night going home and feeling like your body got work, you got a sweat on, like it feels good. You can get that from 2 threes a day. So
awesome, guys.